Obadiah, verse 6. How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up? Barak YAHAWAH, Bahasham, YAHAWASHI, Bahasham, QADASH. Double honors to the apostles, the elders, the bishops, the great millstone who rule well, who taught me this truth, no respect and salutations to the fellow Akim, the house of David, the hopefully elect. This your brother YAHAWASHI coming to you with this truth. And the Lord is bringing everything, all right, down to a bottom line, a common denominator. All roads lead to Rome. If you don't know who runs the world, you don't know who the wicked, the unrighteous, the ungodly is, by now, I don't know where you've been. But the things of Esau searched out, he makes his own tongue to fall upon himself. The Lord is making these things happen. Okay? And we read the scriptures, we get a better understanding when we do see it with our own eyes as well, such as tangible evidence. Let's go to the book of Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, starting at 3. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? And now ye know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. See, there's a time and a place for everything, as the book of Ecclesiastes say. This is the time that this man is being plucked up out of his place. His plans are unraveling, all right? His nakedness is being shown to the nations abroad, and we realize who you are. Let's continue. Verse 7, for the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. So he's going to continue to be on this power trip to try to seize control of the planet and inhabitants involved in that planet, which are mainly the Israelites, along with these heathen nations, for us to be a perpetual slave. Nevertheless, the Lord is going to break into play, okay? And he's going to be taken out of the way violently. Verse 8, and then shall that wicked be revealed. See? And what you're going to see later on in this lesson, you're going to see the revealing of this devil, if you ain't already know. It says, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And by the way of the apostles, the elders on down, mainly at the great millstone, and those of you that's like-minded, we're speaking downfall to this place, downfall to this devil. We're prophesying against Mount Seir, okay? And this is the spirit of the Lord's mouth. We say, thus saith the Lord, right? Verse 9, even him whose coming is after the work of the Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and he has that power. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked. It's not by his own power, though, okay? And he do create these facades, these lying wonders, these mirages that you think is good, all right? You know, from violence unto saying peace, all right? It's death with this man. Verse 10, and with all deceivableness. You see that? Because that's what he's coming with. He's coming as a cunning, subtile hunter. All deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. All right? And for this the Most High shall send them a strong delusion, that they shall believe a lie. You see? And you had majority of our people mainly, which we know 2/3 of them, along with this world, the inhabitants of the earth, has believed in this lie. See, the scripture tells us that what? If he could deceive the very elect, all right? And I'll roughly paraphrase, if, okay, all right, they might, matter of fact, let's just get it. Bear with me. Matthew 24, verse 24, it says, for there shall arise false Christ, Hamashiach's anointed ones, okay, and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. See, it's not possible, man. So we're not ignorant of his devices. And what this video is going into is the devices, this media, which goes back to medium, all right, this witchcraft, this sorcery that they put on deck for our people and pretty much you docile individuals, okay? You people think, all right, that these things that the media portrays and puts out are true, all right, which are not, okay? So going back to 11, 2 Thessalonians 2 and 11, and for this cause the Most High shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. So the Most High blinded you, okay, from not receiving, you know, the truth, for not understanding these parables, these dark sayings, what's really taking place on the planet Earth. Verse 12, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth. You see that? But had pleasure in unrighteousness. And since they created this this thing called technology, all right, which they thought they created, television, media, all right, the news outlets, the movies, everything they make, all right, it was to deceive you. Check it out. Lord willing, this was edifying and comforting.
The amazing world of picture television brings us the news of the world through two central news agencies called Reuters and the Associated Press. The Rothschilds bought Reuters in the 1800s, which later bought the Associated Press and made the Rothschild family owners of the world's largest central news services. To the present day, the world depends on these Rothschild-owned central news services as their main source of news and information. In his book called Who Owns the TV Networks, author Eustace Mullins claims that the major TV networks, radio stations, newspapers, and publishing empires are controlled by the Rothschild, Rockefeller, and J.P. Morgan money cartels through their corporate conglomerates. The bankster-owned media conglomerates include weapons manufacturers General Electric and Westinghouse, which profit from promoting wars. Control over the internet, publishing, recording, and top cable companies can be traced back to the same big five media empires: General Electric, Time Warner, Viacom, Disney, and News Corp. These media monopolies are owned directly or indirectly by the Rothschild, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Oppenheimer Brotherhood. Yes, there are now more stations and more media voices, but they're all coming from the same ventriloquist. Every TV show needs corporate sponsors, and corporate sponsors sponsor pro-business, pro-government programming, and journalists who support the agenda of the big five media owners. While two-thirds of the world goes hungry, these banksters offer gazillion-dollar sponsorships to sports athletes to play with their balls. Why? Because they keep the masses distracted from the important issues.
And welcome back to the show. I scream, you scream. You know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, we all, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest. I scream, you scream, we all know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, well, you know the rest.
I scream, you scream, you know the rest.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
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 Mike Myers says, yeah, baby. Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers says, yeah, baby.
Mike Myers.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday. A child's happiness is priceless, especially on a birthday.
First, the severe flooding here in the Northeast as more rain continues to fall today. NBC's Michelle Kaczynski, I guess she's in a canoe, is in Wayne, New Jersey this morning.
Hey,
Michelle, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, obviously we're getting a nice break from the rain, but not the flooding. This is essentially now a part of the Passaic River in this neighborhood. It rushed in yesterday.
I just got a picture of the conditions that Kayla Brown has been living in for the past 2 months. Essentially, she was by the neck inside of what would look like a steel cage, roughly 4 by 4 by 6, and that steel cage was then inside of a larger container. Now, a massive search is underway in this field behind me because the victim herself told police that she believes as many as 4 bodies may be buried here. George?
Boy, that is just horrific. Okay, Lindsay.
An ABC News producer is being investigated by the network after reported evidence that a live camera shot on Good Morning America was doctored by falsely stringing police tape in the background. The shot featured reporter Lindsay Davis in Woodruff, South Carolina, where a woman was allegedly held captive in a storage container by a registered sex offender. Behind Davis, yellow police tape can be seen with the words, "Sheriff's Line, do not cross." A wider photograph of the scene shows that police tape was actually just attached to some ABC camera equipment to enhance the scene.
Look at a pyramid. In the first couple layers, the really eager, hard-working young journalists are out there trying to get the stories, trying to make a name so they can move up that pyramid. Well, the further they move up the pyramid, the more they realize that, the outlets really aren't interested in major news that rocks the boat.
The boat Charles refers to belongs to those at the top of the pyramid, where the interests of the media outlets are quietly defined. The year is 1917, and Representative Oscar Callaway enters a disturbing statement into the U.S. Congressional Record. The statement reveals why J.P. Morgan interests hired 12 high-ranking news managers. The 12 were asked to determine the most influential newspapers in America. They were to figure out how many news organizations it would take to control generally the policy of the daily press of the United States. The 12 found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, and an editor was placed at each paper to ensure that all published information was in keeping with the new policy. Soon, that policy would be defined by a front group formed by J.P. Morgan and his colleagues. In fact, Morgan's personal attorney was founding president of the organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Today, the CFR maintains that its goal is to increase America's understanding of the world. However, the actual objective of this highly exclusive club is revealed by the rare admissions of the insiders themselves. In the early 60s, a Georgetown University professor collects information for a book favorable to the network of powerful men who founded the CFR. For 2 years, Professor Carroll Quigley is allowed to examine the confidential papers and secret records of this network. Quigley reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. In short, they seek total and quiet control of the entire world. And the CFR is their most visible conduit for carrying out that agenda. CFR members include America's wealthiest tycoons, as well as the highly placed elite in government, academic institutions, tax-exempt foundations, and the establishment media. Ruling Class Journalists, written by Richard Harwood, describes the CFR membership as the ruling establishment in the United States. The Washington Post article boasted that news reporters who are CFR members do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it. Who are these policymakers? Many of their faces are familiar. NBC's Tom Brokaw, CBS's Dan Rather, ABC's Barbara Walters, Jim Lehrer of PBS, William F. Buckley of National Review, media mogul Rupert Murdoch, owner of the giant multifaceted News Corporation. These media heavyweights, and many others like them, are members of the CFR. Powerful corporations are also invited to become members. At the close of the 20th century, CFR influence presided over far-reaching consolidations of media control. In 1995, CFR members Michael Eisner of Disney and ABC's Thomas Murphy merged their media empires. Soon after the merger, the Disney-ABC empire becomes a CFR corporate member. In the year 2000, the world's largest internet service provider, America Online, joins forces with Time Warner, one of the world's largest news organizations. The CEOs favoring the move are CNN's Thomas Johnson and Time Warner's Gerald Levin, both CFR members. Once again, another media giant is created under the shadow of CFR influence. Today, an elite handful of individuals define the agendas that are supported by the empire of establishment news.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to two American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive